Few people truly stop to consider what happens after death. Most prefer to steer clear of the subject, as if it were a distant, irrelevant, or even too uncomfortable a topic. But for those in their golden years, this question begins to resonate with a different frequency, not as a fear but as a genuine curiosity. What exists beyond that final breath? What truly matters at the moment of transition? Researcher Michael Newton spent decades studying accounts from hundreds of patients who, under deep hypnosis, described with impressive detail what happens in the spiritual realm. Among these descriptions, one warning stood out above all others. There are attitudes that should never be repeated when we cross to the other side. And we're not talking about something symbolic or poetic. These are real mistakes that directly affect our experience in the spiritual world. Knowing this can change how we live now, while we still have time to adjust our path. Have you ever wondered what might happen if you arrive on the other side with unresolved emotional baggage? What if the feelings you carry today are directly influencing what comes next? According to Michael Newton, it's not external judgment that matters, but the weight of the choices each soul carries. And the biggest mistake made by many, according to his studies, is trying to escape their own conscience, avoiding taking responsibility. In the spiritual world, this type of attitude not only delays the soul's evolution, but can also trap it in a repetitive cycle of painful learning. Therefore, if this content resonates with you, please consider subscribing and liking this video. That way, you'll stay updated on other important reflections like this, which can make a difference in your life and your journey beyond it. Newton discovered that many souls, upon reaching the spiritual plane, do not immediately enter a state of peace. Some are disoriented, others confused, and there are still those who try to resist the process of inner evaluation. This usually happens with individuals who maintained a posture of denial during their lives. They denied feelings, denied responsibility, denied connections. This pattern doesn't automatically disappear with death. On the contrary, it intensifies in the initial stages after the transition. The soul then deals with a mirror that reflects every choice, every omission, every attitude taken. And this confrontation can be liberating or extremely difficult, depending on how honest the person was with themselves. It's not about punishment, but about energetic coherence. What we are internally stays with us. One of the most powerful accounts Newton shared involves souls who try to exert control even after death. These are individuals who, in life, were accustomed to manipulating situations, hiding truths, or placing themselves above others. Upon reaching the other side, they discover that this behavior creates a vibrational barrier. They cannot access higher learning spaces and remain in zones of reflection where they repeatedly relive their own actions. The attempt to manipulate, lie, or hide continues, but in the spiritual world this deceives no one. There everything is seen with clarity, every intention is perceived, and that's when many souls realize what they should never have done, ignored the need for change while they were still alive. The time to adjust your course is now, not later. Another common mistake is an exaggerated attachment to material things. This goes beyond merely valuing possessions. We're talking about people who build their entire identity around what they own, what they control, or the status they maintain. In the spiritual world, this type of attachment becomes a weight that prevents the soul from rising. Newton describes that these souls become energetically linked to places, objects, or even people, unable to move forward. In more intense cases, they remain for years in a state of confusion, unaware that they have already departed. The pain of detachment doesn't happen at the moment of death, but in the refusal to accept that the essence of being is beyond any possession. And the stronger the attachment, the more difficult the necessary letting go will be to continue evolving. It is also common for some souls to arrive on the other side carrying deep guilt or shame. These feelings, according to Newton, are not punished by any external force. But the soul itself, upon coming into contact with its spiritual group, feels the weight of its choices. The comparison doesn't happen out of vanity, but out of awareness. Each soul knows what it should have done and what it failed to do. And when that clarity arrives, many enter a state of self-judgment so severe that it delays their own healing process. Therefore, one of the greatest pieces of advice from the accounts Newton analyzed is, never carry the weight of unresolved guilt with you. Working on forgiveness, both of oneself and of others, is one of the most important keys to a serene transition. Full self-awareness is an inevitable characteristic on the spiritual plane. There are no masks, no social roles, no excuses. Before its own essence, the soul clearly perceives everything it did, avoided, and postponed. Newton describes this moment as an inevitable plunge inward, where every choice made during life takes on broader proportions. Good intentions matter, but concrete results do too. Many realize they could have done more, spoken less, listened better, and it is at this point that one of the most dangerous attitudes arises: self-punishment. Remaining in this cycle is a mistake, because no soul is there to be punished but to learn. The problem is that some cling to the idea that they don't deserve to evolve. This thought keeps them stagnant, refusing the help that is always available on the other side. Another aspect frequently overlooked during life is the importance of human relationships. On the spiritual plane, the connections we cultivate hold enormous weight. Newton recounts that many souls regret not having shown more affection, compassion, and active listening. The mistake is not in having conflicts or disagreements, but in not seeking reconciliation when it was still possible. When the soul reviews its journey, it realizes that moments of rigidity, pride, or estrangement came at a high cost in terms of spiritual growth. Some souls even try to reconnect with those with whom they had difficult ties, but the lack of emotional resolution makes this reconnection slower and more laborious. Therefore, never underestimate the power of a sincerely spoken word or a humble gesture. They remain with you, even after life's end. It is crucial to understand that the spiritual realm is not a place of instant perfection. It is, above all, a field of transition and learning. Michael Newton emphasizes that what you carry with you are not external titles or achievements, but the level of emotional and spiritual maturity you have developed. If you spent your life running from yourself, you will be forced to confront that truth on the other side. If you cultivated empathy, even amidst difficulties, you will find it easier to progress. Nothing is imposed, but everything is a consequence. The greatest mistake, then, is not having failed, but not having learned from those failures. Evolution doesn't demand saintliness, it demands sincerity. And the more you commit to your own growth now, the smoother the journey will be when this stage of existence comes to an end. There are also accounts of souls who try to interfere directly in the world of the living, not out of love, but out of attachment, anger, or control. These actions, according to Newton, not only hinder the progress of those still incarnated, but also prevent these souls from advancing on their own journey. Attempts to influence decisions, keep people trapped in prolonged grief, or fuel emotional conflicts are attitudes that turn against those who provoke them. It's like an echo that returns with greater force. The spiritual world operates according to clear principles of balance and respect. The more a soul tries to force something, the denser its vibration becomes. The result is a distancing from mentors and a prolongation of its own suffering. The correct approach is to observe, hope, love from a distance and allow everyone to follow their own path. According to the accounts analyzed by Newton, the most serene souls are those who humbly accepted life's journey, even without great accomplishments or remarkable deeds. They neither sought absolute control nor avoided suffering at any cost. They simply lived with awareness. And this is what often escapes us, the idea that we need to be perfect to deserve peace after death. The mistake is to think that the spiritual world is a prize or a punishment. It is, in fact, a direct reflection of what we are internally. When we accept this truth, we realize that the best we can do while still alive is to cultivate integrity, honesty, and the courage to acknowledge our own limits. Because, in the end, everything that is ignored here will have to be faced there, but with more clarity and no escape. Newton also points out a curious and seldom discussed point, an exaggerated fear of divine judgment. Many people live their lives under the weight of a possible eternal punishment, forgetting that the spiritual world, as he describes it, operates through learning, not condemnation. This fear paralyzes, impedes authentic choices, and creates emotional barriers that persist after death. Upon reaching the other side, these souls discover that no one is there to point out mistakes, but to help them understand what they can improve. However, being already conditioned by fear, many refuse this support and isolate themselves. The true mistake, then, is to foster ideas of punishment instead of responsibility. The soul needs courage, not guilt. Crossing death with serenity begins now, with conscious choices and a willingness to evolve. Another common misconception many souls face, according to Newton's accounts, is clinging to the identity they held on Earth. People who are highly recognized for their social roles, careers, or even religious beliefs sometimes arrive on the spiritual plane trying to maintain those images. But there, none of that holds value. What matters is the learning each role provided. When the soul clings to its old identity, it resists the natural process of detachment and renewal. This delays its integration with the spiritual group and its ability to access more subtle levels of consciousness. It's like insisting on wearing a uniform that no longer fits. The transition requires us to leave behind what was temporary, to embrace what is eternal. This letting go can be difficult, but it is necessary for true growth. There are also souls who arrive in the spiritual world carrying deep resentments. Feelings of injustice, hurt, or anger that were unresolved in life continue to vibrate even after death. These emotions create a dense energetic field around the soul, hindering its contact with mentors and spiritual companions. Newton observes that these souls often relive painful situations repeatedly, as if trapped in an internal recording. This is not punishment, but a direct reflection of the energy they carry. To break free from this cycle, there must be a willingness to understand, forgive, and let go. Until that happens, the soul remains in a state of limitation. Therefore, it is essential to work through these emotions while still here. The lighter the heart at the time of departure, the more open the soul will be to receive guidance and move forward. Michael Newton also emphasizes the importance of conscious preparation for death. This isn't about living in fear of the end, but about accepting it as a natural part of existence. Many people avoid this topic as if it were a taboo and end up being caught off guard when the transition occurs. The soul, upon leaving the body, experiences everything with great intensity. The initial confusion can be minimized when the person has already cultivated spiritual reflections during life. Having clarity about values, the meaning of existence, and deep connections helps the soul quickly recognize its new state. Conversely, those who deny spirituality until the last moment tend to face more resistance. The mistake is not in having doubts or questions, but in completely closing oneself off to the possibility that something exists beyond. This mental and emotional rigidity complicates the adaptation process after death. Another less discussed but essential point is the use of time while we are alive. According to Newton, the souls who feel the most peace are those who use their time with purpose, not necessarily by working excessively or accumulating achievements, but by living consciously. They participated in life, were present in relationships, and sought to understand themselves. Those who spent decades living on autopilot, repeating routines without reflection, arrive in the spiritual world with a feeling of emptiness. Their greatest frustration is not what they did, but what they failed to do. They realize that each day could have been an opportunity for learning, connection, or transformation. This regret is silent, but profound. Therefore, never underestimate the value of a simple gesture, a sincere conversation, or a moment of silence. Time well spent is a legacy that transcends dimensions. It's also common for souls who lived with spiritual arrogance to encounter unexpected obstacles. People who in life considered themselves morally superior or judged others for their paths discover that the spiritual world values humility above knowledge. Newton reports that intellectual or religious knowledge, when used to control or exclude, holds no value on the other side. The true criterion is the love with which each soul applied what it knew. Arrogance, pride, or authoritarianism create distortions that hinder spiritual progress. The mistake is not in having faith or beliefs, but in using them to feel better than others. On the spiritual plane, all souls are invited to learn based on equality. The more humility there is in life, the more natural the reunion with this universal truth will be. In many cases, Newton heard accounts of souls who were surprised to encounter old adversaries in the spiritual world. People with whom they had major disagreements or grievances during life were there, awaiting reconciliation. And what is striking is that, according to these souls, the most difficult bonds are often precisely the most important for growth. Running from these relationships or harboring grudges for decades is a mistake that is intensely reflected after death. This is because learning is not just individual, but collective. Each challenging bond brings lessons that need to be understood at some point. The sooner this reconciliation happens, the lighter the journey becomes. Therefore, holding a grudge is a burden that is not limited to physical life. It is a weight that crosses time, preventing the soul from expanding. A curious detail in Michael Newton's studies is the accounts of souls who, upon realizing their mistakes, voluntarily choose to undergo challenging experiences in future incarnations. This demonstrates how much the spiritual process is driven by responsibility and not by imposition. However, he also warns that many of these decisions are made with excessive guilt or a need for atonement. This can lead to unnecessarily harsh future journeys, based more on self-flagellation than on balanced growth. The mistake is believing that only suffering purifies. The soul evolves much more when there is awareness and emotional balance. Choosing challenging paths can be noble, but it also needs to be done with wisdom. It's not about paying for mistakes, but about learning from them. Life, both here and beyond, does not demand suffering, but rather presence, responsibility, and openness to the new. Another point that Newton highlights with clarity is the importance of the intention behind each action. On the spiritual plane, it's not just what we did that matters, but why we did it. Many believe that seemingly positive actions guarantee spiritual merit, but they forget that the universe responds to inner truth. Attitudes taken out of fear, vanity, or obligation carry a different weight than those done out of love, compassion, or understanding. In the spiritual world, intention is like an energetic signature. It reveals the truth that isn't always visible on the surface. Therefore, never underestimate the value of a simple act done with sincerity. The mistake is to live only to please, to appear, or to fulfill obligations. The soul knows when it is being authentic, and that alignment is what truly counts when the body is gone, and what remains is the essence of being. Many souls reported by Newton also spoke of their surprise upon reuniting with the spiritual group they were part of. These are consciousnesses with whom we have deep bonds, far beyond the present life. These groups function as evolutionary families, with whom we share learnings across multiple existences. However, souls who lived in great isolation without opening their hearts to true relationships may find it difficult to reintegrate. The mistake in this case is believing that we can grow alone. Spiritual learning also happens through exchanges, affections, and shared sorrows. Emotional self-sufficiency, often valued in life, proves to be a blockage on the spiritual plane. Therefore, making room for others, learning to ask for help, and offering support are attitudes that facilitate this reunion and strengthen our journey, both here and beyond. Michael Newton states that no soul is left behind. Even those who make serious mistakes, who refuse to evolve, or who face great resistance, continue to receive constant assistance from the spiritual world. The problem is that many do not accept this help. They prefer to isolate themselves, maintain old patterns, or justify their actions. This closing off is what most hinders progress. The mistake, then, is not in stumbling, but in refusing to look at it. Every soul will always have new chances to learn, to redo, to grow. But the more resistance there is, the more time it will take. Therefore, it is essential to cultivate an attitude of openness and humility now. Accepting that we make mistakes, that we have limitations, and that we are here to learn makes everything lighter. What we must never do is close ourselves off to this continuous and generous process. Throughout his research, Newton understood that a soul's greatest asset is not what it has achieved, but how much it has evolved emotionally and spiritually. Every sincere act of love, every honest attempt to improve, every forgiveness granted or received becomes a light that accompanies the soul after death. It's not about being perfect, but about being true. Avoiding rigidity, pride, indifference, and self-deception already represents a great step. What one should never do in the spiritual realm is to maintain the same defenses we use on earth. There, everything comes to light, everything is revealed. And the more prepared we are for this encounter with ourselves, the more meaningful our passage will be. Living truthfully is the best preparation for dying in peace, and dying in peace is the beginning of a new, even more complete and conscious stage of existence. If this content brought you some clarity, comfort, or reflection, please consider sharing it with someone you care about. These words might make a difference in someone's life right now. And if you'd like to keep receiving content like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel. The soul's journey doesn't end with death. It merely changes form. And the more we understand this in life, the more prepared we will be for what comes next. There's no perfect path, but there's always a possible next step. And sometimes that step is simply looking more honestly within yourself. What you carry with you is not what you possess, nor what you appear to be. What you carry is who you truly are. And that no one can take away. Take care of your soul today, because it is with your soul that you will continue tomorrow.